Redditors who have a job where they go into other people's homes, plumbers, electricians, etc. What's the weirdest, most disturbing thing you've seen while working in a customer's house? I'm a face painter who does children's birthday parties. I've never had any super sketchy experiences, just a few rundown homes, but the kids always have fun. I went to one house, kinda messy and smelly, but no big deal. I started setting up my supplies and I heard a weird peep sound above me. I look up to see a guinea pig running through a clear plastic tube attached to the ceiling. Then I take a good look around the house and notice the whole place is covered with a network of guinea pig tubes. The mom noticed me looking around and nonchalantly told me they have like 10 guinea pigs. Used to deliver oxygen to people's homes. Saw plenty of weird things. Lots of hoarders, but this one took the cake. He didn't want to let us into his house, but I had to do a home safety assessment before I could set up the equipment. He was anxious about letting me in because his house was mess. He kept telling me about his messy house. Come to find out, it wasn't just messy. It was filled with 200 chickens. He was proud of his show chickens and wouldn't let them live in a barn or coop. The smell was unbearable. Other than that, he was a super nice guy. Food bank delivery to homebound elders. I always fill 2 banana boxes, around 1.5 by 3 foot deep, of all types of food and deliver to his house. One time after delivering to him for 3 years I have to come inside because he hurt his foot. He had never thrown out a single box. They lined every wall and entrance. He built a castle around his bed, and a series of paths through his house. It was like these pillow forts you would make as a kid but with boxes. I asked him if he wanted help getting rid of them and he said no. That it was fun and helped with his dimension. Has super fun. I'm an electrician and I was troubleshooting a bad outlet in the bathroom of a former NFL player. I was taking all the outlets apart, following them to see if I could trace out the home runs when he comes in and starts talking football. We are in the middle of talking when he just walks over to the toilet and starts taking a shit. I couldn't see him but there was just a little pony wall between us. He didn't even stop telling his story. It was crazy. I walked out because of the smell. He came out a little later and it was like nothing ever happened. I delivered pizza for about 2 years. I had to deliver to a local motel pretty frequently. One day I go to deliver and a large lady, I'm talking 6'0220, was decked out in dominatrix attire. She answered the door ready to get down to business, then immediately closed the door and threw a robe on. She apologized profusely and then tipped me $10 for the situation. Edit, to answer some questions. Sure, I could have gone in, but when these situations come up at 16 you never play them like you think you would. Also, she took one look at me and probably thought I was way too young to be her client. Baby face, I look like I'm 20, I'll be 30 soon. Long ago I did estimates for fire and water damage repairs for a restoration company. This couple had a smallish fire in their bedroom. When I entered the home it's seemingly normal, smells like smoke, there was a fire, makes sense. They take me to the bedroom and it was the mattress that had endured the majority of the fire, along with some of the wall above the head of the bed and smoke damage to the ceiling. Next to each side of the bed are 10-gallon buckets filled to the brim with cigarette butts, and hundreds of spilled over butts all over the floor. I was just in awe how they could live like this in their bedroom, especially since the rest of their home seemed tidy and normal. Also completely beyond me why they wouldn't clean that shit up after the fire if for no other reason than insurance adjusters being able to blame them, rightly, and possibly not pay out. How did the fire start, I asked. Required to ask, no idea, the husband replied. My boyfriend is a locksmith. During the 2008 recession, Las Vegas had hundreds/thousands of homes that were getting repoed or abandoned. The company he worked for would have him go and change the locks to keep people out, and usually this happened in the middle of the night to limit the possibilities of running into ex-owners of the properties. I sometimes tagged along, mostly to explore some of the ridiculously big houses that people had just left, but helped some of the time. This one house looked totally normal from the outside. You couldn't tell any difference from any of the other cookie-cutter, planned development homes. But inside, in every room, there were those timeout dolls. If you have never seen them, they are a doll that stands against the wall with its hands up to its face, and even more creepy, usually they have no face, but they look like a kid hiding their face or pouting after being put in a timeout. When I say they were in every room, I mean every single room. And not just one, but dozens, lining the walls, not laying down, but standing up against every wall of the house. The house's electricity had been shut off, so all we had was flashlights. Walking into each room, it did not get less creepy seeing doll after doll. He is already afraid of dolls, and this made it so much worse. Altogether we counted 63, but there might have been more. My uncle is a handyman and he went in to do some work for a family, and the toilet was just feces. Not like someone didn't flush, rather nobody did, and the bowl was just crammed full of hardened stool, which had clearly been an accumulating scenario. Disturbing? Not at all. Weird? A bit. I was a medical equipment delivery guy for a couple years. Went into a dementia patient's house and had to instruct his caretaker on how to set up a large tank of O2. As I was kneeling down, my phone went off with my really low-key notification tone, which was a singular beep. Well, the pet bird nearby seemed to have taken a shine to that noise and mimicked it perfectly in tone and volume. The caretaker and I looked at one another, with her saying, "I've been here for 6 years and he's never done that before." From then on, every time I delivered and knelt down to re-educate the caretaker, "SOP demands it," that bird would instinctively ping me until I let my phone notification sound go off, after which the bird would celebrate by bobbing his head up and down and turning in a circle. Edit: this blew up. The patience is staying. Something tells me a caretaker for a dementia patient would need quite a bit of it. Friendly reminder to check in on your older friends and family who choose to live alone or with very little supervision with home care. They miss you a lot. I've posted this before a while back, but used to work pest control, went into student accommodation to deal with insects. Can't remember what type. Carpet moths or bedbugs, maybe? Anyway, that's not the point of the story. This one room is fairly clean, but we have to spray all fabrics with the chemical in question to prevent any eggs from having a safe space to gestate, so open up suitcases, wardrobes, that sort of thing. One suitcase is full of used tampons that she was saving for who knows what reason, actually, and I don't want to know. Nasty shit. That didn't mention it, just did the job and tried to avoid eye contact at the end. A few years back I worked as an electrician. I found a guy with a rifle laying next to him where he had tried to blow his head off through his mouth, but he had missed the vital parts. Brain and blood was all over the bed, but he was still breathing. He was in coma state of mind. Heard later that he died the day. I painted a girl's room one time while she laid in bed and played on her phone and took naps. I knocked and expected her to leave, but she just laid back down. It was very strange. I did apartment maintenance for a while. We started quarterly inspections, and the first day we opened a door and the smell that came out was indescribable. The guy who was with me was ex-military, and he said that we were about to find a body. In the maintenance community this tends not to be a matter of if you ever find a body but when. He told me that he would go in alone if I was uncomfortable with it, but I went in too. We didn't find a body, but we found a mountain of trash that took up the entire dining area. And honestly just trash, mostly food packaging, everywhere, and that accounted for a lot of the smell. We also found a dog. A very sweet golden retriever that was starved for attention. It was obviously being left to just piss and poop all through the unit. It probably hadn't been outside in weeks based off of the smell and general condition of the unit. We went outside, locked up, and called the property manager for her to come by. While we were waiting, he came home. The look on his face when he saw us was terrifying. The manager talked to him and they set a plan about cleanup and gave a time frame for him to get the unit back to regular. The other maintenance guy stayed with him for a while that evening. When we left the unit, he was sure that the guy would kill himself that night. Turns out the renter had recently went through a very rough divorce where his children had been removed from him with very little warning, and he was spiraling. I left the company before I learned how it all ended. I hope he is doing better. I used to do flooring, and when we had to get up the subflooring due to water damage, underneath it there was a black garbage bag. When I opened said bag, it had a bunch of women's clothes in it. Didn't think anything about it until we dumped it out and found bloody ripped underwear and torn dresses. Told the owner we had forgot some stuff at work and wouldn't be back until tomorrow. Called the police and never went back. The house was soon up for sale a month or so later. Just read a post in another subreddit about a girl with social anxiety who hid under her bed when the plumbers came, and then the plumbers caught her under there. And then she ran and hid in the bathroom until they left. Wonder if those plumbers are on Reddit. I most definitely want to hear their side. Was a firefighter another time in my life. Had a middle of the night call to a mobile home for an elderly lady once. We walk in and it's dark, but as my eyes start to adjust I think, oh, that's weird wallpaper. I keep looking around, it's on the ceiling too. Weird inconsistent patterns and rectangle shapes. Eyes adjust some more while we are talking to her. WTF? Are those puzzles? She had hundreds of puzzles that she had glued when completed and then glued them to every surface of her mobile home. Walls, ceiling, living room, bedroom. Every inch too covered. Weird. But you do. Especially in your own home. Certainly not as bad as most ITT. I tutor privately, so sometimes I meet clients at their homes. One lady had a huge shrine to Bob Berdella, which is really confusing because usually women attracted to serial killers gravitate toward the attractive ones. I was a paramedic in Oakland and once I was in a home where a child has been bitten by a rat in her crib. As we were standing there talking to the mother about our options, a rat walked up to one of the firefighters and bit his boot. The firefighters stomped the rat to death and the rat was taken to the health department for testing. That was a strange situation. Work and lead abatement for a city/county run program. It's mostly low-income people that receive the free, or heavily subsidized work. The people receiving the work are out of their homes for a week or two while we work, so many people will just leave so much food out. This one lady was going to be out of her house for 2.5 weeks while we did a bunch of stuff. She left a full, raw turkey just laying on her counter. Of course we toss it by day 4 because it's starting to stink and attract a lot of flies and bugs. A week later she comes by and wants to get it to cook it, and becomes incredibly hostile when we tell her we pitched it. The city ended up buying her a new turkey that evening. Another family left about 10 pounds of raw chicken on their stove. Like not in a pan or a bag, but laid out directly on the stove top. Also threw that SHT out. One of the more recent ones was a house that was occupied by a group of Nepali immigrants. There was about 3 full families, total of about 15 to 20 people, living in the house. Apart from the human feces in the basement and the dead chicken they left, they had a little chick coop in the basement as well. Their house was infested with roaches, not like seeing one a day, but opening a cupboard and dozens falling out. It was so disgusting. Another one, this piece of shit guy kept his dog locked in the basement for days at a time. There were hundreds of piles of dog shit and literal puddles of piss on the basement floor. The sick part is that he left the dog there knowing that he would be out of the house for at least 2 weeks. The neighbor ended up taking the dog and gave it to their daughter who lived elsewhere, and last I heard, the dog was doing much better. But to clean the basement, before we painted it, we literally had to spray Febreze in our masks to not throw up. A more sad one was this extremely old lady, like late 90s old. She needed someone to help her daily as even just getting up was a struggle, but her shitty kids refused to ever help. There was a hole in her living room ceiling going into the bathroom. Like you could reach your arm through and wave to the people below. It was right next to the toilet and had rotted out because whoever installed the toilet did use any type of ring seal. Every time you flushed, shitty piss water would just splash downstairs. They had a red Solo cup taped to the leasing pipe to catch the water. Now, for the ethically disturbing stuff. This program was for people with children under 8. Because LEAD has been linked to numerous developmental disorders like autism. Due to limited funding, in order to get the work done, the people had to prove they had a child in the house at least 4 days a week. So many people abuse this. Claiming they watch their niece/nephew 4 days a week and potentially taking away the ability for someone else to have the work done that actually had kids at risk. This one slumlord, who was renting to the dog guy above, abused the system to get 8 houses done for free, or very close to it. The total amount for the work that was done was about $200,000. People even went as far as taking lead paint chips from a different house and putting them in/around their windows to cheese the tests. I delivered pizza, but for older customers I'd always go into their homes to bring it inside for those who were severely handicapped or just didn't have the strength to bring their food inside. One time I delivered to this lady who was covered in cat hair, head to toe, and the inside of her house was rancid. I mean, I couldn't go in there without holding my breath every time. One time I went and she had in her kitchen on a table a paper plate with what looked like teeth, and I mean a lot of teeth, different colors and shapes and just horrifically repulsive. Don't know whose teeth they were. From what I could tell she had all if not most. Haven't heard any stories about her since, so I'm guessing she moved or something else. Never will forget that smell though. Ugh. Fire alarm inspector. Working in a cheap long-term hotel and knocked on a door where a larger man dressed in essentially a purple bikini opens the door half asleep. Entered to test the smoke detector and tried to keep my eyes off the bed, but I knew I had seen something. Tried not to look, but I did, and there's a big old purple dildo next to the TV remote. The detector then decides to not alarm in a timely fashion, so I'm just staring at the wall hoping it will alarm, so I get out of the room. Not sure if this is disturbing or just weird. I used to help deliver furniture for my grandfather's upholstery business. One day we were delivering a couch to a rather expensive-looking home. Right as we walked into the front door, there was a floor-to-ceiling glass case built into the wall that was about 12 feet long and 10 feet tall. It was filled with those glass dolls of varying sizes. A few of them were at least 4 feet tall. Each one had a different outfit on. What made it extra creep was the fact that all of the dolls were angled so that they were looking at the front door. The only person that was home, not positive that they lived alone, was a 75-year-old man. Obligatory not me. Friend's mom is a realtor. She went to check out a small room in the basement of the house she was trying to sell. She opened the door and the floor and walls were covered with cave crickets. She closed the door and immediately called an exterminator. I was a delivery boy in high school and would occasionally deliver to two people who genuinely freaked me out. The first one was an incredibly large man with elephantiasis. It's tough to believe in God after seeing something like that. Plus the smell. This one and the next one probably didn't bathe. Ever. Was really sad. The second one I think had HIV or AIDS before we had real treatments. He had what looked to me like hundreds if not 1,000 injection marks all over his body. He lived all alone in a small mobile home that had metal stairs going up to reach the door, and by the time I reached the first step the smell was already upon me. These people lived horrible and lonely lives. The second guy would often tip me with wet, crumpled up bills that smelled like him. I am a journeyman house painter by trade and I have been self-employed in the profession for over 20 years now. About 10 years ago, I was going to paint an older woman's home. She was probably 75. I was painting the kitchen and the attached small family dining area. All of the furniture was moved, carpets were out, pictures off the walls. This place was ready for paint. I always start by removing the faceplates from outlets and switches. First one, just 2 screws, pulled the plate off and found the outlet full of termites. Packed. Dead, thankfully, but this was an indication something bigger was happening here. I went and asked the woman about it, and once she saw it, she called her representative at ABC Pest Company to come over immediately. After explaining the situation, he was quickly on his way. I went to standby mode. I wasn't going to paint anything if the house was coming down. Luckily, the client had purchased the paint and she was going to pay me by the hour. The project I was going to be painting was going to take me about 5 hours total, $125. Well, the pest guy looked all around the house, pulled a few more outlet covers off with the same results, all packed with dead insects. He then changed into full coveralls and climbed onto the house. He was only there for a few minutes, maybe 3. Out he comes and declares the house a total loss. The floorboards, he said, were hanging on by a thread. The walls were all soft and about to be pushed over. The entire house could collapse at any moment. I packed my tools and said my goodbyes. I told her not to worry about paying for my time. I had been there for about an hour. She had much bigger problems to deal with. I used to help with dispatch calls at an ISP. One day I get a call from a tech who was always a joy to chat with. He was always super laid back and easygoing, and would always joke around the phone for a few minutes. One day he calls in, and this is how the call goes. Me, yo. What crack-a-lackin', Deck, hey. I wanted to call to formally let dispatch know that I will be leaving a job early and unfinished. At this point I was super concerned because he was never formal about anything with dispatch. Me, okay. Let me pull up the accounts, get information. What's going on, Deck? There are chicken everywhere, and chicken SHT covering everything. Chicken SHT is what burned out the PO. I let the customer know that this would be a charged service call, and they tried to get the chickens to attack me. I took the notes down, and sent an email to management since the tech had been threatened and let him go to his next job. Apparently chicken people were infamous for this, but the account was never noted, so we had no way of knowing what the tech was getting into. I don't remember if the company closed the account, or crazy chicken people did, But they called in every day for a few weeks to bitch about how unprofessional the tech was and how we were a terrible company. It was good times. I once helped renovate an old building that was a house but converted to a business and was super run down when my employer bought it. We did a ton of work including removing subflooring and ceilings. We found a hidden cellar in the back suite, once the kitchen or mudroom. The thing was filled with trash and random odds and ends. There were GI water ration cans dated 1956. In the middle suite we kept finding spoons in the ceiling as we were taking it down. It was weird, but then we realized that it was where a junkie kept ditching their spoons. Real estate photographer. Seen plenty of dildos and women's underwear. Lots of weed laying around and kids skipping school to bang or get high, but one incident sticks out. Wasn't disturbing but totally weird. Client was wealthy and had a very nice home. Her and her husband were home while I was shooting and I asked the woman if I could remove her pink robe which was hanging on the shower door. She replied, "Feel free to put it on." Caught me off guard, but I just moved it aside. This woman was beautiful BTW. Petite and fit. She has tasteful nude photos of her around the house, so I keep moving through the house to shoot and I told her I was about to wrap up but needed to photograph her walk-in closest, to which she replied, "Try on anything you want." I didn't take her up on her off, finished the shoot and left. Just an overall weird shoot. I'm training to be a residential property appraiser in Miami, Florida. The guy I work for does everything from $10+ million mansions and foreclosures. A good rule in the business is never open the fridge in a foreclosure. It's no longer '07, so most foreclosures we run into are old people who've got no family and can't take care of themselves and can't take care of the properties. Super sad shit to run into. Worst thing I've seen is a hoarder who obviously had some mental deficiencies. The appraisal was for a refinance on his property. The place stunk. We couldn't get into half the rooms because the doors were boarded up and he had a ton of dogs. The guy was super confused why we were there and said his bank guy told him the appraisal fee was about 3 times what we normally charge. Luckily on that one we basically told the bank it looked like his bank guy was trying to scam the dude without explicitly saying so. They canceled the appraisal so we didn't get paid for it, but me and my boss agreed the bad karma was worth the loss. I did desktop support for a medical imaging company. All of the transcriptionists were work at home, so I would often have to go into their homes to support their desktops. One time, a woman called into the help desk cause her computer was making a weird noise and smelled like something was burning, so I was dispatched to her house, and when I walked in, the house was, to put it lightly, in disarray. I went into her office, afraid to touch anything, and there was her desk amongst various dirty dishes, takeout boxes, pizza boxes. I go under her desk and unplug her desktop and go to open it, and I see cockroaches scurry out from inside the desktop. I don't mean a couple, I mean hundreds. I jump back and swipe one that managed to start up my pants leg, and there is a swarm of cockroaches pouring out of this desktop. I leave the house and immediately call my supervisor and tell him what I found, and I tell him that I refuse to go back into that house. I walk to my car and I'm totally ooked out. I strip down naked next to my car, I'm not kidding, and put my clothes in the trunk. I drive directly to my house and pull into the back. I toss my clothes into the garbage, including my shoes. I hosed myself down in the backyard, went immediately into my bathroom from there and took the hottest shower I've ever taken. The next day, my boss pulled me into the office to write me up for not finishing my day in the office, and I immediately asked for an HR rep. When the HR rep got there, I explained what happened, and the HR rep told him that it would be in the best interest to not write me up because I could sue and probably win. I left that job a month later. I used to do crisis mental health assessments to determine if the person needed to be forced to the hospital. One person was paranoid that his bathroom was contaminated and that black tar from cigarettes would rain down on him if he went in there. So he'd be going to the bathroom in a bucket and hadn't showered in months. His bedroom had some SHT buckets in it, but also at least 200 empty cartons of goat milk because that was the only thing he'd eat. Yeah, we took him to the hospital. In high school I had a summer job where we would clean out houses owned by banks, like foreclosures. Owner died and had no one to take the house, etc. Usually it was just furniture, old clothes, that sort of stuff. Opened the door to one house though and it immediately smelled like complete SHT and rot. Usually it's a fridge that was turned off that never got cleaned out, but oh no, this was much worse. All throughout the house there was around 25 cats, all dead, that had been there for who knows how long, all in different states of rot and decay, some covered in maggots, some covered in ants, but all very dead. If I had to guess, the last few to die had to have been dead for at least a month prior to us going in. And this was mid-August, so they had all been in there all summer just baking in the heat. And what did we do, you ask? Went back outside, got bandanas or extra shirts or whatever we could find, tied them around our faces, layered up on gloves, grabbed some snow shovels and garbage bags and got to work. Probably took at least 3 hours before we finally got them all out, and most of them just broke apart when we scooped them up. Must have puked 10 or 15 times in those 3 hours. Nastiest SHT ever. Handyman here, was called to a block sink at a lady's house. So I get to the door and she opens it, and the house was like Dolores Umbridge's office. Every wall, shelf and horizontal surface was covered in decorative plates, figurines, teapots and stuff. The hallway was exactly me and one plumbing toolbox wide between occasional tables and shelves with more tat on them. That was the most nervous, slowest walk I made through anyone's house, trying not to knock anything over. She was friendly enough and made tea, but even then I had to turn around slowly and be careful not bump anything or knock anything over. I was installing alarm systems, and one day I went out on a service call. Stepped into a literal cesspool, and thanked God for my plastic booties to protect my shoes from walking on their disgusting carpet. Was shown to the alarm panel, and when I pulled the panel off the wall to see why it was not powering on, an army of roaches started scurrying out of the wall. Turns out the panel died because several roaches had electrocuted themselves on the circuit board. I work as a maintenance guy in a 500+ unit community. Let me tell you, I've been working here for 7 years and have seen it all, from someone's house being completely infested with roaches to a person whose house was floor to ceiling hoarded with old newspapers. The one house I will never ever forget belonged to a lady who had a lot of mental health issues. I went over to her unit to check for damages after Hurricane Florence. When I went in, I was overcome with the smell of pure sewage. I asked her if her toilet was acting up. She said she didn't know. I was like, okay, I'll check it for you. When I stepped in the bathroom, there was SHD piled above the rim of the toilet. I asked her how long has her toilet been non-functioning. She said she didn't know. She doesn't flush the toilet because that's how the devil gets in her house. A hoarder that lived with a bunch of geese in the house and would speak to them constantly. They would always bite her. It was a very large home she owned, and she moved into the guest house to rent the big one out. She was flighty in the brain. She was a tiny, frail old thing. She left me standing in a hallway full of piles of newspapers topped with pots and pans. I'm just standing there. And I'm looking at these old BW photos in the hallway. I asked her who they were of. They're of me, dear. She used to be drop dead effing gorgeous. She was some sort of old actress/model. I just looked at the pics, then her, then pics. That's when it hit me how cruel Father Time can be. Then she yelped as another goose bit her. Sigh. Was a carrier for the post office. When you first start, you only have one route, 1 day a week. Every other day you cover for someone who calls in sick or is on vacation or something like that. So one day I covered for a different carrier who was sick. I get to one house and they had 4 packages. On the front door there was a sign that said, please don't knock or ring, just open door and leave the packages behind the door. So I'm like, okay, this is weird, but whatever, it must happen a lot because the sign was old and dusty. So I open the door, go in the house as normal. I bend down to put the packages down neatly. As I rise back up, there is this old dude, had to be like 60 to 70, just standing there in tight-ass jeans, tight-ass tank top with a clearly dyed jet black mustache, drinking beer out of a can with a straw. I naturally got scared for a second, so I tell him, sorry, you scared me, I didn't see you there. And he just says, that's cause I wasn't here. So I just say, well, I'm sorry, and start to leave, and he says, hold up, where is so-and? So I say, oh, she is sick, so I will be covering for her today and possibly tomorrow, and his words verbatim were, nice, maybe she should stay sick a while, I'll make sure to wear something cute tomorrow. I fake laugh and got the hell up out of there. I go into a lot of flop houses and slum buildings. Hobos use litter boxes for a bathroom. I stepped in people poop a couple of times. Went into a place one time where a group of 4 or 5 were zonked out. Heroin probably. None of them woke up, and one of them, I wasn't sure, was alive. We called the cops for a welfare check. Here I go. I used to wash windows for a company a while back. Indoor, outdoor, window tracks and screens. Well, we go to this one job. Lady has us clean the windows on the outside of this house and then sends us over to her father-in-law's place just up the road, and she leads us in. This ancient guy is sitting at the counter facing the door, a little grizzled with some band-aids here and there, missing the tops of his ears. He also had a big yellow square gauzy bandage situated on the top of his head. I shrug it off and continue with my work, easily some of the dirtiest windows I've ever cleaned. I go into the room and the closet was open and filled with rifles, shotguns and all the ammo to go with it. I think this is an important detail. I go back downstairs and start cleaning on the window above the kitchen sink. Now every time I've gone back inside or outside, this guy was always facing the way we came in. Now my coworker comes through and I glance over at him, but something else catches my eye. Underwear. That yellow gauze pad sits about an inch of exposed skull between the pad and his skin. His skull is exposed. It was all I could do not to fall off my step stool. It was the color of your Aunt Betty's walls, who had been smoking since 12. I have a decent reason to believe this tough old survived a mauling by some sort of animal. I don't even know what to think about this still. Not weird or disturbing, but this has always stuck with me. I used to deliver pizzas. I delivered to this elderly couple. The lady answered the door in a nightie and wearing one sock. She was taking her time to get her money, so I browsed around their setup inside. The only thing they had hung up on their wall was a 5x7 photo of Abraham Lincoln. That's it. I used to do a lot of in-home catering. One day I was delivering some platters, and a kid ran out the front door. He looked to be about 3 or 4. Anyway, he trucked off right down the driveway, heading to the road. I jogged up behind him with a fruit platter in one hand, and grabbed his arm with my free hand, and walked him back to the house. When I told his mother what had happened, she just smiled and lightly scolded the child, with one of those "you know you're not supposed to go near the road" comments. No, he didn't. Not me, but a friend of mine works for a cleaning business and would tell me stories of some of the nasty places she had to clean. But the one that disturbed me the most was when she went to clean for a 40-year-old obese white lady. She said out of the places she had to clean, this one was the worst by far. Her house looked like an actual trash dump with everything everywhere and a couple of rats, but what took the cake was when she entered the bathroom. Crap was everywhere, but mainly on the toilet lid. She told me the lady had never cleaned for the past year she has been living there, meaning she continuously sat in her poop-infested toilet over and over for about a year or more. I thought her customer had a mental problem or something, but my friend said she seemed completely normal conversation-wise, so she must just not care much for hygiene. Plumber here. Went into a house to work on the master shower valve. Opened the shower door and saw a huge dildo stuck to the shower wall. Wife was standing next to me after having just showed me where the shower was. Never batted an eye. She had to have seen the uncomfortable look on my face, but simply moved on without a word. She didn't move it or anything, I just had to work with it hanging on the wall beside me. I can't prove it, but I think it was on purpose. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.